Today I'm going to run through static positions, some arm balances that you should be training if you're doing calisthenics. They fill a lot of gaps, they're stepping stones to some of the harder movements. So if we take something like a crow position, we've got a strong crow that we can move around. That's a great transition to do some of the handstand push-up variations. If we take something like a bent arm planche position, it's a cool, impressive movement, but it's also the bottom of the 90-degree handstand push-up. So lots of different movements to cover. So let's jump in first of all with that crow position. Now there's two variations that people often talk about and get confused or muddled up with the terminology. So most people will call the crow position when the knees are on top of the elbows in that stacked position like that. A frog position is the same thing, but now my elbows are on the inside of the legs and it's more of a flatter position like that. Both work and both are very useful in different ways. So I recommend that you play with both of those variations. If you're totally new to it, what I want to be thinking about is lots of weight in the arms and shoulders and less weight in the legs. So we don't want to be climbing on with heavy legs onto our arms. We want to try and get more weight into the upper back, shoulders, arms, so our legs are lighter and then I can literally step into the position. Now, if you can't find balance in the position, one thing you can do is just to start to ease forwards. Think you want to slowly increase the weight that's in front of us and balance out the weight behind us. As soon as you take your head and shoulders down enough and go forwards enough, your tiptoes should become lighter. Once we get used to that, we can tip a little bit more or even bend the knees and bring the heels up and just hold that position, come back down again. Now we can play around with that. We can take the head and shoulders down towards the floor, lifting the hips and feet up and vice versa. So getting used to being able to do that. We can progress the movement into single leg. So single leg, I'm going to transfer weight across, but actually I'm transferring more weight into the upper back and shoulders. So there's less weight in both legs, which makes it much easier to lift one leg. And notice I'll lift the leg up and not backwards. If I take the leg backwards towards the wall, it's shifting weight in that direction, which I need to counteract with more weight in that direction. So I recommend when you're learning the single leg version is to extend one leg up in the air, not behind you. And make sure your head and shoulders are quite low down towards the floor so it makes the hips lighter and easier to lift up. So we can keep progressing that crow position or Bakasana as it's seen in yoga. So I could go from there into single leg variations. I could go to straightening the leg, holding it up in that position. I could take both legs off. As long as I take my head and shoulders back, put more and more weight into head and shoulders, those things become easier and easier. So if your goal is handstand push-ups, that is a really good progression towards handstand push-ups where you can start with momentum to kick you up, or I can go super slow up to handstand push-up. If you want to progress it even more from a balance point of view, you can go into the single leg, single arm version, which is used in breakdance in that air baby position. So here, you rotate, take the top left leg up and over, and then lift that hand. Some sort of sweatband on the elbow or some chalk between the knee and the elbow is really good. I don't know if you noticed there I started to slip. And then we can go on to the crane position. So the crane position is either like a bent arm planche where I'm leaning my knees on my elbows, or it's just a straight armed version of the crow. So it's that position. Now in yoga, they'll tend to take their knees very high towards the elbows, but I wouldn't particularly worry about that knee position. I would just try and focus on pushing out towards protracting, so rounding that upper back position. So this is protraction where we round out there, not being retracted or collapsed to there, and pushing the arms dead straight. External rotation, so more turning out with the hands, really does help with that one. Now that crane position is a cool skill by itself, but it could also be seen as a progression towards tuck planche. So if I hold that, bring a knee in, bring the other knee in, there's my tuck planche position, or from that position, I could press, that's hard with no warm up, to handstand from there. But I'd argue that that's probably level, if not slightly harder than some of the other press progressions. I wouldn't normally use that when programming towards a press handstand. Next, let's look at the L-sit. Now we can advance the L-sit all the way through to a V-sit, which is basically the same position, but having the legs in front of your face. I can't do a V-sit of any height, but basically it's taking the legs up there. But most people are going to be looking at the standard L-sit. Now a standard L-sit on the floor, we need to make sure that we can get into this position. So have a flat back and 90 degrees at the hip. From there, I can lift it up into that position. Now, a lot of people can't do this position because they don't have the mobility to do that. So check in that you can sit in that position, and that is really important for your L-sit. So notice there that I've got a flat low back. If your back is rounded, it means that when you sit on the floor and try and get into that position, your body's going to be spilling out, and you're going to have to use lots more strength to try and hold the position. The more efficient that position is, the easier it is going to be to hold that 90-degree L-sit. The L-sits can be made much easier by bending the knees and coming into that position and elevating the hands. P-bars make that much easier, but you could use steps, books, yoga blocks, and anything in between. These size P-bars are really good for other movements as well, because you can even do rows or train to bar muscle ups on these things, strict bar muscle ups, not the kipping ones. So your standard L-sit position to start with would be this, knees higher than hip crease, and then just slowly increase the distance out with the feet, trying to keep the knee crease at the same height. I'm not a fan of doing this, because yes, you can hold it with straight legs, but it's not teaching that hip closing position and doesn't allow you to go any lower. So ideally, have the knees higher than hip crease, all the way out, wherever you get stuck, hold there for time. And then there's variations of the L-sit, so I could come into a straddle L-sit. Now the straddle L-sit is seen as the base for the STALDER press or the straddle L2 handstand. And again, it's much easier when you already have the flexibility or you raise the hands up. Next, let's look at the forearm stand. Now the forearm stand is seen as harder than the other arm balances because we're now getting a longer, taller position. So relative to the base of support, it's harder to hold this position than a crow, just because I'm taller, but the base is still much bigger than the handstand position because I've got this square, rectangle or triangle, depending on what shape I make with the hands, compared to the very small base I have in the handstand position. So for a lot of people, it's the first movement that they can go into a handstand-like position and hold away from the wall. But if you are new to it, I'd still recommend that you use the wall. Remember, when you kick up, it's much easier than a standard handstand kick up, so be careful you don't smash into the wall, and then just practice stepping off in that position. Now the base of support does make things easier or harder, so I can change that. I can come into a triangle, I can connect the hands, I can rest my head on my hands. Now if you rest your head on your hands, I would actually call that a tripod position or a headstand position, but it's still a cool arm balance. But from a strength point of view, I'd rather be in this position and use the shoulders to move around to hold the balance and get a good connection with the forearms and the hands. Now we can dramatically change the shape of this, so I could go into a triangle, but now there's one corner of the triangle, there's the other, and I could do something like this, hand out to the side, balance in that position, if I can find it, there. And that's just a cool arm balance again. It doesn't really take you anywhere, but it's a cool one to play with. You can even lower down to those from handstand, where you add some rotation in. So I'd be in my handstand position like this, and then I rotate, bending the left arm and the right arm, but I'm taking the right elbow down, stop in that position. You could then come all the way down to your forearm stand there. But that definitely is more of a cool trick than a progression towards harder skills. And then we have the headstand, which is very similar to the forearm stand, a definite tripod head where we have two hands and a head position being the three corners of the triangle. I'd recommend you have a big triangle. So if I go like this and have a very narrow stacked position, so my head is nearly between my hands, that makes the base of support very thin, and I'm going to be more fragile towards my overbalance and underbalance. If I can take my head further forwards like this, then that's going to be much cleaner. Now notice my headstand position, my angle is facing that direction. I prefer in calisthenics to teach that than a vertical position, because what that means is that I have more weight in the hands and shoulders. So if I want to push from here and take the head off and then go all the way to handstand, it's much easier because I already have the weight in the right place. Where if I'm in this position, it's now impossible, or is impossible, to push up from there. Now from a balance point of view, you could keep advancing the balance, and some people will balance only on their head. But that's a specific skill, and if you do want to work towards that, and I recommend that you reach out to a coach that specializes in a skill like that. Someone like Yuval on hands, Dan Liddard are experts at teaching that. Then we have the planche variations. I recommend everyone trains planche variations, whether your goal is just to balance a freestanding handstand, having your upper back strength, having scapular strength is really important. It could literally be this position, so just holding that protracted planche lean. So I'm rounding the upper back, turn the toes over, I'm pushing up with dead straight arms, my hands are externally rotated, and I hang there for time. That could be it. That will transform your strength in the straight arm push just by adding that in a few times a week. If you do want to progress it to start floating the feet, exactly the same setup, get used to that protracted position, and then we're just going to walk in to a tight tuck position. See if you can hold that light toes. If you can lift up. You can use band support, and you could obviously just keep progressing that to the harder and harder progressions, open the body out towards that amazing full planche position. Then we have the easier version of the planche, which is the bent arm planche. Now the bent arm position is easier because I can create a bigger base. So I'm going to call my base the torso and my arms. I'm going to make contact between my upper arm and my torso. It's not an elbow lever. I'm going to cover elbow lever in a second. It's arms around to the side there. I'm externally rotating. Now P-bars makes this much more comfortable, much more easier to take the head and shoulders forwards, and it also raises the hands up. So now I can bring that in, bring my arms into my side against my torso and go into a tucked bent arm planche position. I can open out from there all the way out to a straight-legged version. Now I am pushing my arms into my side, so I'm making contact. The harder version would be to open out a little bit and have a bit of a gap, but I don't think contact is cheating, but I think elbows in is a different skill. So the elbows in, which is more of a peacock or an elbow lever position, is now I'm specifically pulling the elbows in towards the hips. I'm going to rest on the elbows, and then I can open out, but I'm still resting heavily on the elbow. So I would call them different skills, but they're very, very similar. Now you can progress that elbow lever position to single arm. Now the single arm version, a good way of learning that is just to have the hands externally rotated in this position, walk around, bring the elbow towards the belly button towards the elbow, find a comfortable position, open that out. Let me find that comfort there. Open the body out, then walk away with the fingers, get to one finger and be able to lift there. Now that's a tricky skill, but I would go as far as saying that's the easiest single arm balance that you can learn. And then it opens the door to other variations like the QDR. So the QDR is used in capoeira. So I'm going to externally rotate the hand. This time, instead of bringing the belly button towards the elbow, I'm going to take the hip on top of the elbow, take the other leg round, pull that down. So that top leg is coming down. Then I lift up this hand and balance there. That's also a freeze in breakdancing, I think, as well. Then we have the shoulder stand. Now, a shoulder stand is a staple that I use with all my clients. I think it's a super exercise, foundations to a lot of the strength skills, especially the calisthenics or handstand strength movements. So basically with this position, we're just learning to go into a ball and be upside down and hold that position. Now, you could look at this as the bottom of the dip, and then this is the top of the dip. So see, I'm in that top support position, exactly the same as the dip, but instead of just going down, I go down and rotate round to that L-sit position. So being able to come in and out of that position is really good for understanding that seesaw that's involved in things like 90-degree handstand push-ups, even standard handstand push-ups to scoop you out of the bottom, bent arm press handstands, L-sit to handstand. It's really, really important to understand that, and when you get good at it, it's going to help you make those skills easier and easier and allow you to get more repetitions or unlock that first rep. Now the shoulder stand itself can be done between boxes, chairs, P-bars, on the edge of a step, between two boxes. There's loads and loads of options here. I'm going to externally rotate the hands. I'm going to bring the upper arms into my side. I'm going to take collarbone down towards the box. Now at this point I can't lift up. My legs are too heavy. They're stopping me. If I keep walking my knees towards my chest and then squeeze in, I can lift up. So see there, I'm lifted up. What I'm not doing is kicking, jumping, or trying to use momentum to go into the position. That's more than likely going to end up in me going over. And I want to be able to stay in control the whole time with this one. We can stay in a tuck position until we're super comfortable in that position. And then we can start to open up, hold, show control, and then go all the way up when you're ready to a straight position. Now notice the straight position isn't vertical because my head and shoulders are in front of my hands. If I did go vertical, I would definitely go over. So it's this position, not that position. Now that is the bottom of the deficit handstand push-up. And it can also be used in cool transitions where we go from a shoulder stand position through to an L-sit, maybe a bent knee version if you're not so flexible, or if you're more flexible, a straight leg version coming round to a harder variation of the shoulder stand. Now, ideally, when you're learning the shoulder stand, you'll have someone here to spot you and they can push you back if need be. But if you train by yourself, using the wall is a really good way of doing it. Just make sure, again, you're not kicking or jumping into the position. You should be able to come down there, find balance, just bend this leg, find the wall, and then find your balance. And then you can start to play. And if you do feel like you're going to go over, bend the leg and just support and balance and support yourself. And make sure you come down with control as well. And then we have my favorite. The reason that I train like this, the one that got me into all of these movements, is the good old handstand. I recommend everyone does it. It's great for flexibility. It's a great fun challenge. It can be progressed from easy variations where we just put our feet up, hold for time and build strength and conditioning in the shoulder. We can start to learn balance by pulling from the wall to train our over balance. Turning around and training our under balance using the shoulders to pull from the wall. Notice I'm not kicking, I'm using the shoulders. That increases our balance window. So then when we start to freestand, we've got this big balance window, we've got super control, and we can just step into it and hang out there for time. And then we can just keep progressing it and progressing it until we get our balance good enough to balance on one hand. So that's a lot to take in. I'm not saying that you should train all of those together, but pick the ones you like the look of the most, or the ones that are part of the building blocks to the skills that you'd like to achieve. Let me know down in the comments if I missed any. Let me know if you have any requests. Reach out if you'd like coaching, either via the website or see the links in the description for my app, and I'll speak to you next time.